Test 1, 2.
Just turn it off.
That.
So audio check, sorry everyone, this is just a check of the chairman's microphone. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you very much. See if it works. Testing, yep. I am indeed. Good evening everyone and welcome to this planning committee. I'm Councillor Mike Leedy, I'm the chair of the planning committee for this evening. Before we start, a matter of some bits and pieces as usual. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the high street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Romwell Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. Members of the committee and officers will now introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Good evening everyone, I'm Lynn Barton, Councillor for Shrub End. Thank you.
Councillor Mike Holton, Hands in St John's Ward.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward. Councillor Darius Laws for Rural North Ward and substituting tonight for Councillor Lee Tate.
Martin Warnes, Beerchurch Ward.
Jackie McLean, Markstone Lair Ward.
Councillor Roger Mannion, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch.
James Ryan, Planning Manager.
Daniel Cooper, Planning Officer.
Daniel Bird, Planning Officer.
Irene Gimo, Historic Buildings and Areas Officer.
Chris Harden, Planning Officer.
And Simon Cairns, Joint Head of Planning.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
And could you give a explanation for them while we're changing over as well? So.
Yes, Chair. Whilst I have the microphone a second, our Head of Services at the Town Hall has just handed me a phone, a cable and some papers that they think might be members that they've left Councillor Davidson.
I'll pass around.
So, apologies, Chair, but that's now sorted.
Thank you. That will stop me from selling that on YouTube tonight. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will have a break at 7:30 or at an appropriate time. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. Item 2, we have substitutes. We have Councillor Law for Councillor Tate. Good. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, councillors? Councillor Laws.
I probably should declare, Chairman, that I am a paid up member to the Friends of the Colchester Archaeological Trust and also the Colchester Civic Society.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify that would be an other registrable interest? Yeah. Whilst I have the microphone, I need to make a declaration again that I won't be clerking items 7.1 and 7.2 as a close family member has been involved in the creation of that planning application. So my colleague Matthew Evans will be clerking that item.
Thank you. Item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5, have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Pause. It says here. Item 6, there's no minutes for presentation to the committee tonight. Item 7, we've done all that. So now we'll go through the applications tonight. There are 4 applications. We have 7.1 and 7.2, the Holy Trinity Church, Trinity Square, Trinity Street. Those down as 2, they'll be taken as one item, but we will be voting on both of those items. And we have Chris Harden present that tonight. Public speaking against, there's 2 speakers, Sir Bob Russell and John Burton. And public for, we have 2 speakers, Matthew Stirl and Hannah Loftus, and councillors, Councillor Goucher, Nissen, and Councillor Goss. Although we haven't seen Councillor Goss.
It's just arrived.
We still haven't seen him yet, so he can't speak. Oh, is he? Oh, sorry. He'll give me for that later. On 7.3, we have land to the west of the Folly, Alair de la Haye in Colchester. Daniel Cooper will be presenting. No public against. Public 4 is Robert Eburn, and we have a councillor statement from Ward Councillor Councillor Ellis. And then lastly but not least, 7.4, 4 St Bowles Street in Colchester, otherwise known as Silk Road nightclub. Daniel Bird is the presenting officer. We have public speaking against John Burton, and public 4 Sam Good, and Councillor Goss as visiting councillor. Thanks all. So now we move on to item 7.1 and 7.2, and over to Chris Harden to do the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application at Holy Trinity Church at Trinity Square. We'll be taking the planning application and the listed building application together. So the planning application is for minor alignment of boundary wall and railings and repositioning of 23 gravestones. There will be additional footpaths, hard surfacing, additional gates, removal of some railings and new lighting. And then the listed building aspect of that relates to the repositioning of 23 gravestones and the minor alignment of the boundary wall and
excuse me, Chris, can we have it on the screen, please, so people see the presentation rather than us? Thank you.
Sorry, Jim, I thought it was up there. Oh, it's up there now. Okay, there we go. So that's the application as I've described. And this is the site plan. You can see the site outlined here in the centre of the screen. And this is a plan of the existing site. So essentially you'll see there's existing footpaths through the site, either side. And we'll just go to an aerial view showing an indication of the proposal, which I'll go into more detail shortly. So from an aerial view, you've got the changes to the entrance here, this side of the church, where my cursor is. Footpaths in here, changes to the access here. So in terms of more detail, you'll see that the site is being opened up this side of the church here, where my cursor is. So the railings and wall will be removed on this element, and then you'll have wall and railings put this area here with benches next to them, then access into the site with these footpaths around here. And this side of the entrance of the church where my cursor is, a similar thing will be undertaken with access through the gates here to provide the footpath around here. There are some gravestones being relocated, and I'll show you a detailed plan of that shortly. Just take you through some views of the current churchyard. So this is a view of the churchyard looking towards Holy Trinity Church. View of the south part. This is a view looking to the side of the church. Note various tombs and gravestones. And this is the other side of the church. So this is the same side with gravestones and tombs, trees, and then the development opposite. This is within the site. The members viewed the site in detail early this afternoon. And this is a view of the side of the church where there are some gravestones laid down here near a French drain, and these will be lifted. At the moment, they're obviously not in a great position, and they're probably not in their original location. So these ones will be relocated, and I'll show you where on the plan shortly. This is a view looking into the side door of the church. More pictures of the gravestones. This is a view looking into the side of the new entranceway, and these gravestones will be moved to a site I'll show you in a second. And this is a view to the left of the tower as you look at it from the front, where the site is being opened up. And another view, the other side to the rear of the church, showing gravestones here which will be moved. They don't appear to be in the best of conditions, some of them along here. That's a view looking at the rather overgrown area, that door to the rear that we saw on site. That's a view opposite. So in terms of alterations, this is a closer view of the proposal. And so this is the side and rear of the church as such. So there'll be a new gate going in here where my cursor is. And then this purple is where a new wall and railings will be added to match the existing. And then here in blue, you've got existing wall to be retained and removal of railings. And this gate here, where my cursor is, to the top of the drawing, you'll see existing gates will be rehung and the steps will be repaired and repainted as needed. So you'll note that around the churchyard there's this red line, and that shows where the existing church and wall and site boundary would be retained, apart from the access points in that I've just shown you. This is a view on the tower side of the proposal, showing a closer view of the opened up area here with the benches. So the railings and the walling would be taken out here, essentially replaced here with walling and railing. And here showing how that would be achieved on this side of the tower. So you'll see here there'll be existing gates to be reused and repositioned. And this is a wider view of the area to the left side of the tower as you look at it from the tower, and showing the footpaths, the new gates with brick steps here to match the existing, and the same here as I showed previously. And this is an overview, and I'll show you in large sections of this, but essentially, if you can make out these small arrows, this is where the graves are going to be repositioned. Gravestones, not graves, gravestones. So there'll be two repositioned just here, and then from the alongside the church wall, they'll be repositioned within the site, some adjacent to the footpath, and another located here in orange. So the same applies here, arrows showing where the gravestones will be repositioned. And then here, dotted orange would be repositioned in this area here, circled by my cursor, if you can see that on the screen. Then others here towards the gate, the far rear boundary of the site, being repositioned from their position right against the fencing, repositioned to a location here adjacent to the path. So this shows the repositioning in closer detail. This is the side of the church showing moved from the French drains to here and alongside the footpath. More detailed the other side, showing a larger scale. And then this is an overall lighting plan. It'll be too small for you to see the red dots, I think, so enlarge the plan a little bit. So essentially, these small squares on the plan alongside the footpaths are bollards. And then these circular annotations on the church down the side here are where there would be some wall-mounted luminaires, such. There was some illumination by the gates as well. This is indicative though, because we have a condition about lighting which will be applied, so we will need to see the precise detail of that to make sure we are happy with the lighting proposals. This is a larger version of the other side, showing an indicative idea of where bollards could be alongside the footpath. Again, the luminaires by the gates here and here. And then here are some extracts from the heritage statement. This shows the historic plan as taken from 1897. You'll note that there were some footpaths throughout the site at that time, and obviously some of those footpaths have been lost in the past, but they were present in 1897. So the graveyard has changed over the years. And here's a view of the current state of the boundary wall. So here's the frontage tower. The boundary wall is not in very good condition in various sections, and that will be repaired under this scheme. And this is a plan just showing accessibility, showing the widths of the paths within the site. So the 1.5 metre paths are the blue ones, the blue one here, and the red paths are the 1.2 metre wide paths within the site, and the purple circles are the turning and passing places at the junctions of the paths. The red arrows show stepped access, and the other areas here in green arrows show accessible to all users. And then this is just to cover the tree issues on the site. You'll see that there will be no dig construction within the root protection areas of the trees in these areas hatched here on the plan. And then this is just to show an area where this orange area here, where there will be a little bit of trimming of canopies of the trees, but the remainder will be untouched. So I'll just take you back to the plan while I go through the proposal. We have had 2 further letters of objection which have been received, and those are put in the addendum sheet that members should have in front of you. So just to give the background, the site is within the conservation area. The church is a Grade 1 listed building, and the church and the churchyard are part of the town deal, which is funded by central government under the Levelling Up Fund, and the City Council is working in partnership with a local charity to restore and adapt the church for it to become a community hub, and also for works to enhance the public realm of the site, which obviously includes the churchyard works surrounding the church. In the master plan, there is an identification that the Trinity Square is an opportunity for enhancement. So overall, the proposal is considered one to be judged on its merits, and there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Sorry, I've just adjusted the slide. So going to the detailed merits of the proposal, the application is considered acceptable in terms of its impact upon the character of the conservation area and the setting of the church and the fabric of the church and churchyard. The scheme has been negotiated in consultation with the Conservation Officer and with Historic England. It's considered that it achieves an appropriate balance between enhancing the public realm, accessibility to the site, and also preserving the heritage aspects of the site. It will also involve the repair and refurbishment of some of the boundary wall and railings, and the vast majority of the walling and railings would be retained, as explained earlier when I showed you the plans. The actual moving of the gravestones, well, those are shown to be moved only a short distance. Some of those gravestones are considered not to be in their original position, including those ones by the French drain and also probably by the gates. Nevertheless, we are assuming other gravestones may well be in their original position. But on balance, it's considered their moving is acceptable, having regard to the public benefits overall on the site, and some of those gravestones will be repaired and improved as well, so there'll be a general enhancement in that respect. In terms of lighting, as I said, the plan is indicative, and this will be carefully conditioned to ensure that visually it all relates well to the character of the churchyard and the church, and also that the police are happy with the positioning and style of the lighting, and also environmental health will need to be assured that lighting levels are acceptable, so a condition in that respect would be applied. Historic England have not objected to the indicative light plan. So turning to the antisocial behaviour aspect of the scheme, the police have confirmed that they have no objections to the detailed layout. They have suggested a detailed condition to manage the site, including access times to the site, involving closing the gates at certain times and locking them. Lighting and other security measures will also be included in that condition. And in terms of impact on neighbouring amenity, it's considered that those conditions I put forward would minimise any impact on the amenity of neighbours from the increase in the public access to the site. Environmental Protection have raised no objections to the scheme, so the condition as detailed will be added, applied, and then once details are received under that condition, that will be analysed in consultation with the police and with Environmental Protection. So in terms of other issues, there are no highway concerns. It's not a detriment to highway safety. The Highway Authority have not objected to the scheme. There would not be a significant impact upon trees and vegetation, subject to a condition about not digging in the root protection areas. It's also not considered there'll be any impact upon wildlife. The ecology survey has been submitted and there's a condition relating to that. So overall, we're recommending approval for the planning and listed building applications with the conditions as outlined in the committee report. Would also recommend the addition of an informative referring the applicant to the provision of section 78 of the Mission and Pastoral Measures 2011 legislation, which covers sort of moving of gravestones and other items as such. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. And now we move on to the public speakers. So can I call forward John Burton, please? You have 3 minutes. The bell will go after 2. Let you know you have a minute left. Time will start when you start speaking, John. Thank you. I don't think, excuse me, I don't think your mic's on.
May I start again?
You may start again, okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I speak for Colchester Civic Society on the planning applications relating to the changing the historic churchyard boundary and disturbance to Trinity Churchyard, asking you to refuse both applications. A council funding application for repairs to the church received our support. We welcome the proposal to paint the railings and restore the walls to the churchyard, both the long overdue projects. Some like the wild appearance of the churchyard, others see it as lack of maintenance. Improvements can be achieved without the western boundary alterations or moving the grave markers. I speak with experience from my current membership of the Church Building Council and the Statutory Advisory Committee to the Church Commissioners on Redundant Churches, and for caring for 2 World Heritage sites, Westminster Abbey and Canterbury Cathedral. Such experiences advise you not to allow the alteration to the churchyard, especially the realignment of the railings, placing land, which many will see as sacred, into the public highway. The application shows pictorial evidence of the long history of the western boundary line following the back of the pavement in Trinity Street. Changing this boundary will change the character of the Colchester's historic Trinity Street, which is within the city's conservation area. Preserving the character and appearance of a conservation area is a statutory duty for the decision makers, and you've adopted local plan, most notably DM16 historic environment. In cases of less than substantial harm, as is in this instance, the public benefit flowing from the scheme can be taken into consideration as part of the planning balance. That's also 202 NPPF. But all harm to designated assets is undesirable and should be avoided wherever possible. That's 119 NPPF. Currently, the gates are locked, stopping public access. However, if access is required or thought wise, simply unlocking the gates would give access to the churchyard. So there's no perceivable public gain with this proposal to balance the less than substantial harm to the character of the conservation area. So your statutory duty appears to require refusal of the application. An additional element of the conservation side of leave as is that the additional pavement proposed will be over many buried citizens and requiring the moving of grave markers. NPPF section 16 paragraph 204 is thus relevant and reads, in considering any application to remove or alter a historic statue, plaque, memorial or monument, whether listed or not, local planning authorities should be regarded to the importance of the retention in situ and where appropriate for explaining their historic and social context. So the NPPF requires retention in situ of monuments like grave markers. That's another reason for refusal. I could not find this in the committee report. Members wonder why so much public money is proposed to be spent when there are potholes to fill elsewhere. The proposed breed and gravel paths, if not regularly maintained, will ensure that there is even more potholes to deal with. Do please look at maintenance requirements published by breed and gravel for the proposed paths. Such paths attract weeds. Who pulls them out? Who reconsolidates the surface? Are you simply adding more to your maintenance budget for no gain? Thank you, Chairman.
Went over a bit there, but I'll let you off. And
Very kind.
a reminder that potholes are the authority of this county council, highways, and out of our remit as a plan. Much as we would love to do that, we will do it properly. But there we are.
Thank you, sir.
So Bob Russell, you know the score, Bob? Time.
To circulate to members, Chairman, the committee will know what Trinity Street looks like, but none of the presentation showed the railings in Trinity Street. Chairman, these are irresponsible applications. The recommendations are irresponsible. To approve.
Sorry, can I just stop you there?
Oh, sorry.
It's actually not in part of the procedures that we allow the photographs of the stage in there. They should have been submitted before the meeting, or perhaps as part of a petition. We'll ask for that. I've always, for the years, I've never had anything handed to me at that time. That would have been ideal. But as it's making their way, we did do a site visit today, and a lot of us went, and we have maps of all the site, we know the area. So we'll, when it gets to me, I'll confiscate it and hand it over. And now could you please start again? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. These are irresponsible applications and the recommendations are irresponsible. To approve the removal of the churchyard railings would be an act of municipal vandalism, the worst in almost 60 years. The recommendations are in breach of 3 council policies, 2 of which, both dated only last year, are completely ignored. There are 49 pages of report on the Holy Trinity churchyard proposals, but no mention anywhere that the City Council owns the church and churchyard. No mention is made that the applications are on behalf of the Town Deal Board, a quango whose 15 members include only 1 councillor, the leader of the council, and whose attendance at the last board meeting saw only 4 of the 15 bothering to turn up. The description at the opening of both applications is inaccurate. This is not a minor realignment of boundary wall and railings. It is removal of half the railings facing Trinity Street from either side of the church tower as far as the churchyard gates. There are 11 mentions of tenants of the church being a local charity, but only 1 mention of this being Community 360 and no disclosure that the council funds Community 360. There is no mention of why some 40 plus years ago councillors voted to restore churchyard railings because of antisocial behaviour, which is worse now than it was then. There is no mention that churchyards of St Peter's at the top of North Hill, St Martin's just 100 yards to the Town Hall and St Mary at the Walls Arts Centre are locked because of antisocial behaviour. There is currently no antisocial behaviour at Holy Trinity Churchyard because it is locked. There are 3 planning reasons for refusal. Mr Burton has spelt those ones out. It's in the application to remove the churchyard railings is in breach of the council's statutory duty to protect the character of the conservation area. And it's also under paragraph 200 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that any harm to or loss of significance of designated heritage assets should require clear and convincing justification. The second reason for refusal is contrary to the Colchester City Council City Centre Public Space Protection Order, which was introduced or repeated now in year 7 only last October. That states that the council should not allow any occurrence or reoccurrence of areas where antisocial behaviour could happen. This is creating areas where antisocial behaviour could happen. The third reason for refusal is the application is contrary to the council's policies of promoting and protecting biodiversity and wildlife habitats. Last June, the local planning committee unanimously agreed a biodiversity supplementary planning document produced by the council's planning department. Proposals for Holy Trinity Churchyard are contrary to both the spirit and recommendations of what is set out in the SPT. Chairman, the planning committee surely must uphold council policies. There are 3 reasons why this should be refused. I've set them out, and I hope that the committee will agree that upholding council's policies must be the determining factor, and there are 3 breaches being proposed for the removal of the railings.
Thank you. And then we move forward to the speakers. We'll have Matthew Sterling first, please. And Matthew, also, Dale, you've been here before. We'll start when you start speaking.
Thanks very much. So I'm here to speak in favour of this project, which is to open up the churchyard and improve it as part of our work to boost the economy of the city centre. It's a scheme which is included in the city centre master plan. It's a light touch scheme. It's one that will avoid disturbing any human remains, and it's one that has the support of Historic England. And work to support centres is really important. Our centre is home to some key retail, to leisure, to historic assets. It's a transport hub, and it's home to over 10,000 residents. In fact, the importance of city centres is underscored by the Centre for Cities, which says that on average, centres like ours take up 0.1% of the land of their district, but are home to 8% of the businesses and 14% of the jobs. So this project is part of our work to boost the centre, and centres really need support at the moment. With the rise in online shopping, with the rise in out-of-town shopping, with the changes to leisure patterns, and also with the increase in home working, centres need our support if they're to remain vibrant. So this project is part of our work with the County Council to do just that. And actually, the direction of our approach is endorsed by the investment that Colchester has achieved recently. So we've seen massive private sector investment through things like the Phoenix renovation, through the gigabit broadband, but we've also, the City Council itself has attracted £40 million from government through the Towns Fund and the Levelling Up Fund to boost our place. So this scheme is part of that work. As I say, it's a light touch scheme. It will avoid disturbing human remains. It will help protect and promote one of our historic assets. We've talked about the repairs to the wall, for example. It will rejuvenate and care for a space that, let's face it, has been neglected in the past. It will create a quiet space for pausing in a busy city centre. It's the result of very extensive engagement with both businesses, public and stakeholders. It will leave the square locked and secure at night. It will improve the appeal of this part of the city centre, and it will encourage more visitors and more footfall. So I really hope the panel can support the recommendation of officers and support this scheme.
Thank you. And now we move on to Hannah Loftus. Yes, please. And you have 3 minutes. The bell will go after 2. It will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. I'm here to speak in favour of the scheme as one of the directors at Hat Projects, who are the architects and designers for the scheme, but also as a local business. As many of you may know, our office is based on Trinity Street itself. Our 8-strong team and the team of Patch Cafe and the other tenants in our building walk up and down Trinity Street at all times of day and night, and we have a really intimate understanding of how the area operates. So Holy Trinity Church is an absolutely extraordinary heritage asset in the city centre. its tower has stood for over 1,000 years. And it's seen a huge number of changes over that time. And I think I'd just like to put these proposals in perspective of that over 1,000 years of changes that have been seen here, from when the city centre had orchards and gardens within the city wall, through to more recent times. The churchyard was deconsecrated in the early 1950s, and in 1956 it was actually given over to the council, the borough council as it was at the time, under the Open Spaces Act. And the Open Spaces Act says that open spaces should be made accessible for public use and recreation, and they should exist for the enjoyment of the public. So arguably, although probably won't thank me for saying this, the council's slightly been in dereliction of that duty over the last few years, because there's been no public access to the space at all, despite it being a designated open space. In fact, 1956 was not the only change that happened, because in the early 1970s, when Lion Walk Shopping was built, the area was substantially remodelled, and the design and access statement shows the impact of those changes. So at that point, the churchyard was reduced in size, and the existing walls and railings that you see there today were put in the 1970s as part of that work. So they don't date back beyond the 1970s, although we do know there were different forms of railings before then, and they certainly don't date back the over 1,000 years. So to answer some of the questions, we really want to do the minimum possible to restore public access to the open space. Why is simply unlocking the gates, as has been suggested, not enough? Well, there's another really important public duty, and that is under the equalities legislation to actually make sure that when we make places accessible, they're accessible for every single member of our community. Someone in a mobility scooter, someone in a wheelchair, a family with small children and buggies. That pavement is incredibly narrow. It's really difficult to get in and out of that churchyard. We want to make sure that all of the citizens of our community can enjoy and appreciate that amazing Saxon Tower, can stand and look up at it and appreciate its significance. And we believe that the design proposals achieve that as sensitively as we possibly can. So we very much hope you can support the application.
Thank you. Can you turn the one? Thank you very much. And now we move on to resident councillors. We've got Councillor Goucher first, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say that I walk past Trinity Church every morning on my trip to work at the college, and the photographs that were shown there don't really represent what it looks like in the spring or summer. They obviously were taken in the autumn or winter, when there's leaves everywhere, where it's messy, where it's kind of very brown. I counted over 10 wildflowers in Trinity Churchyard in the spring, and those photographs were completely unrepresentative of that. But I have three real concerns about this, and that's why I urge people to reject it. First one, antisocial behaviour. As people have already mentioned, the opening up of the church door, removing part of what is now the churchyard to make it a public pavement, risks it becoming a stopping off point for people urinating on the way from maybe the Purple Dog to the High Street, or vice versa on a Saturday or Friday night. So there is that issue, but there's also the issue of potential littering, potential mess being left there. So it's not perfect at the moment because it's not maintained as well as it should be, but I envisage there being even more litter, fast food wrappers, those awful carton things, you name it. That creates far more work for our officers cleaning it, presumably on a daily basis, as well as making sure those gates are locked. And at the moment, we have pressures on staffing with Castle Park and so on. So this is making even more work for them. But I have very, very serious concerns about the door and the kind of the risk of antisocial behaviour in that area, which, let's face it, is a massive problem in other heritage sites in Colchester, like St Botolph's Priory, which we all know the history of. The second concern I have is about the loss of green space. This is one of the few wildlife sites in the centre of town. There aren't many left. Obviously we have Castle Park, but apart from that, this is one of them. There are bats in the tower, and that will not be forgotten as far as I'm concerned. There are also wildflowers, lots of different species of wildflowers, and replacing wildflowers with non-native species, with ornamental plants, is not ecologically valid. It was raised the other night that we're giving away non-native trees as part of our giveaway of trees programme, and that's bad enough, but removing wildflowers and wildflower sites and sites for birds and replacing it with non-native species is not really ecological. So I have that concern as well. And as I said, I counted over 10 wildflower species in that churchyard in spring and in summer. Yes, it needs to be maintained a lot better than it is. I think we'd all agree on that. But removing wildflower sites and stuff is not really the way to go. Finally, though, my biggest concern, I think, is really heritage and the changing of the setting of a historic building. This is a churchyard is what you expect to see surrounding an ancient church, not an open space with people drinking and eating. I know that might sound old-fashioned, but that's what I expect to see when I see, one of the few remaining Anglo-Saxon churches in the area, possibly the oldest church in Colchester, although the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church laid claim to St Martin's, but it's certainly one of the few Anglo-Saxon towers, albeit augmented with Norman build. And I expect to see a tranquil space around that with graves. And I have a massive problem with moving the gravestones, because within a few years people forget where the burials are. And if those paths are going over graves, if people are sitting around in their over graves and people don't know they're there, I have a big problem with that. I find it a bit disrespectful, to be honest. Put it into context, my grandfather was born in 1899. So people might say, well, that's burials at the end of the 19th century. Well, that could potentially have been my great-grandparents. Obviously, I'm from Leicestershire, but the point I'm making is it's not that far back for people not to be concerned about the people that are interred in there. And so that is a big concern of mine. And it seems to me that it's kind of putting a potential economic gain above preserving the tranquility of a heritage site. And I'm not convinced that there will be much economic gain from this particular project, unlike some of the excellent projects that are going on elsewhere in Colchester, like St Nicholas Square, which, let's face it, will improve an area that currently is extremely unpleasant. That is not the case with Trinity Churchyard. It's a tranquil space, it's a nature site, and that's why I'm urging people to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we call on Councillor Nissen. You have 4 minutes to say, but bell will go after 3. Councillor. Oh, sorry, 5 and 4. 4 and 5.
I'll try and keep it brief, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for hearing me this evening. So I'm speaking to you this evening as a Castle Ward councillor to ask you to really consider these applications, which is being taken as one, in light of both the antisocial behaviour and the ecological concerns, as well as the concerns of Castle Ward churches who have raised serious issues about antisocial behaviour and the need to keep churchyards locked during the daytime. Colchester Civic Society and Sir Bob Russell are correct to object to this proposal. Although within the reports in front of you they're described as minor, they will have major impacts. At this time, antisocial behaviour comprises a substantial proportion of my ward casework, and there are ongoing concerns about this at this time, which we're all aware of. It's good to see that Essex Police have included their recommendations within the meeting pack, which you all have, and I would support, if this proposal does go ahead at this time, additional CCTV and extra lighting to ensure safety in this area. There is a proposal in front of you to landscape and create a nice green oasis. However, at this time, we already have an oasis of biodiversity, wildflowers and fauna. I believe that man does not need to meddle with nature at this point. It just needs a little bit more maintenance. The suggestion has been that Community 360 will be the proposed leaseholders, and they ought to be responsible for the security and locking up at night and maintaining of the facility. Residents have raised concerns to me about the inclusion of oak benches, which look wonderful for the first few months that they're there, but they often deteriorate quickly and they can look very shabby. As far as I can understand from looking through this proposal, there is no inclusion of maintenance. Who's going to pay for those oak benches to be repaired, maintained, and kept looking in a nice state? In addition, I can't read my own writing, excuse me. Sorry. So, thank you. As has been commented this evening, the site is currently overgrown, but I think that that is a case of nature reclaiming man-made objects. It's somewhat romantic and beautiful in the style of David Lang, the architect, and it conjures up wistful images and memories of Caspar David Freundlich. I can't speak German this evening. The German painter who created beautiful landscapes, for which we have one at this time. We just need to tidy it up a little bit. In addition, there is a proposal for 6 new bins to be added into the Holy Trinity Churchyard. This would create, as I understand it, an additional workload for operatives who would have to empty it 2 to 3 times a day, and that's assuming that people are not littering the facility and that they're actually using those bins. Heritage bins also cost a lot of money to maintain. They require additional paint. It's not just from B&Q, it's a special kind of paint which costs money as well, whereas the maintenance costs factored into these proposals. I believe that in terms of the proposals you have, it would be possible to keep the current railings and the brick wall, repair them and don't move them, because it doesn't accord with our obligations as a council under the conservation zone. I think that the proposal could include a wheelchair ramp instead of the brick stairs, which has been identified to go by the library's new entrance. And I think that the existing gate entrances ought to be kept as they are. Comments have been made already this evening regarding expenditure. I do understand about restricted funding in different pots from different places, but how can we as an administration justify potholes, cuts in services, but we're spending money on changing Trinity? We may understand it, but do our residents? Thank you very much for your time this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And now, Councillor Cost, please. Yes. And you get 5 minutes, the bill will go after 4 months, and good luck.
Thank you. This application has been quite controversial. There's been a lot said about it in various meetings, and now tonight you're deliberating on 2 of the applications in front of you. Overall, upon balance, for the regeneration of Colchester and also moving forwards with the town fund that we got £19.2 million for, upon balance, I support this application because I do think it's good for the economy. I do think it is good for Colchester overall. Some of the concerns that have been raised previously have been updated in the revised plans, and issues around antisocial behaviour have been addressed by the police, where they have put in writing that they support the application, and their designing out crime officer has looked at this. So I think overall, on planning terms, it should pass. Now, having read the papers with a very independent, fact-based view, as you know, that's how I tend to look at things, and listening to 2 of the ward councillors this evening, and listening also to some of the objections and reading the objections, most are not planning grounds. Most are operational. So as passionate as I get about litter bins and the fact they're putting 6 in, they're not planning grounds. They're operational grounds that do not come into your decision. And in fact, most of the objections, most of the comments are not planning grounds and therefore are discountable, I'm afraid. Expenditure is not a planning consideration. Land ownership is not a planning consideration. Potholes are not a planning consideration. Now, you're all professional. You've all been trained. Many of you have served on this committee for many, many years. So when this is deliberated and decided on tonight, you can only decide on those very grounds under the MPPF and the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. So upon balance, I personally think this is good for Colchester. It will be good for the economy, and it will be good for business at a time when the city centre is under the microscope, and we need to do everything we can to help business and to get footfall into the city centre at this moment in time. And we have heard that the issues with the nighttime economy and the worries about copulating as Sir Bob has put it in previous meetings, I believe that will be taken care of with keeping it locked in the evening. So upon balance, I would say that the committee has no choice other than to approve it, because there are no legal grounds, I believe, to reject it that would stand up upon appeal. And that is ultimately what you are deciding tonight. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go back to Chris now. There's been quite a lot tonight. It's been suggested 3 policies have been broken of the council's own one. Can we have a look at that one? We'll go for the others. And after, for clarity, when Sir Bob mentioned the PSPO, I was a cabinet member at the time that signed that off. And I was also the cabinet member that, with the rest of the cabinet, Mark was that we decided to close the Priory and the Arts Centre because of major disturbances throughout those areas there. And it did resolve the matter after a couple of months. We did that. But with licensing head on and law, it's no good saying it's going to do this and it's going to do that. You have to have evidence-based that it will happen. And at the moment in time, it hasn't been opened, so we don't really need that. But I just want clarity that was my point of view, that just to point out. So over to Chris to just discuss some of these issues.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in terms of planning policy, it's been argued that it is against local plan policy in the MPF in terms of the impact on heritage assets. In that respect, the council can approve development if there is less than substantial change, less than substantial harm to such heritage aspects. And our view is that the public benefits outweigh the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets. There's an increase in accessibility to the site. There's also an enhancement of some of the assets on the site, including the walling that's in poor state of repair. Any elements added are in keeping with the character of the area. So, it is a judgment call, but I wouldn't say it's contrary to policy. It is a judgment against the NPPF and the local plan. It's considered there are significant public benefits to the heritage assets on the site.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, with regard to the heritage impacts and of the proposals, I would like to reassure you, insofar as you need look no further than to refer to the government's own advisor on the heritage response to this application, where they have gone beyond their usual no objection to indeed support the proposals. So I think with regard to an independent view on this key point, you need look no further than the Historic England consultation response, which is set out in your report, where they support the proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now over to councillors. Councillor Lynn Barton first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to say that I do actually support the extra pathways. I support the extra entrances with gates, but I am struggling with the removal of the railings. And I'm also struggling with why we need such a large open space, why we can't keep it confined with the pathways. So I did look back at the history of us as a council opening up churchyards. I know some of this has been said actually, but I would have thought we would have learnt from our experiences. I know you can't preempt what's going to happen with this application, but surely we can learn from the past. I used to rehearse at St Martin's when I belonged to Colchester Theatre Group, and the graveyard was open 24/7. It was very pleasant. But then we got so much antisocial behaviour that it had to be locked. And of course, the residents in the Dutch Quarter then ceased to have the problems that they'd been having. Same happened with St Peter's Church. Once that was closed, problems solved. I also listened to Anthony Roberts on Scrutiny this week, and he was asked whether the graveyard adjoining the Arts Centre could be reopened as a public space. And he said, no, absolutely not, as he'd experienced huge problems with drug taking, needles, antisocial behaviour outside his office, which backed onto the churchyard. And since the closure of the graveyard for him and the arts centre, things have been 100% better. Then we look at St Bottles. When I was portfolio holder, we had huge problems around St Bottles with antisocial behaviour. So why do we think this is going to be any different? That's it. I'm looking back at the history of our experiences with graveyards. Why is it going to be different? So I do share people's concerns, and several people have mentioned that. And I do agree with Anthony, actually, that sometimes it's rather nice in a hectic world to have an undisturbed space. But my question is, how can you protect residents living adjacent to the churchyard, and there are quite a number, from being disturbed on a regular basis, given the strong evidence from the past? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sam McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this afternoon when we went for our site visit, there were quite a lot of people hanging about looking at us, wondering what we were up to. Now that's probably because there's a group of people in orange high-vis standing around by the church, but knowing Colchestrians as I do, because I am one, we're pretty proud of our ancestry and we're very proud of our heritage. As I left the site visit and was sort of walking back home, a lady stopped me and she said, "You lot are modernising for the sake of modernising." Now I obviously couldn't say anything because I'm on the committee, so I said, "Just tune in tonight and you can watch us." So hopefully she is. I got into this because I wanted to listen to the concerns and views of residents of my ward or across Colchester as well, and represent them as best I can. I didn't want to be complicit, you have to be sometimes, but I didn't want to be complicit in doing things for the sake of doing things, and that's what I think we're doing here tonight. There is going to be enormous public backlash to this, there already is, and it will continue to be like that, and I am sick to death of us doing things that almost deliberately antagonise residents, and this is one of them. And in terms of the economic benefit, people sitting around loitering from silly o'clock in the morning to silly o'clock at night is a deterrent, not an incentive for people to come into the city centre. And I appreciate what Councillor Goss says. I don't disagree with him often, actually I do, but certainly on this thing, when he mentions the objections are not on planning grounds, he does have a point to a certain extent, but considering this is a council application, objections of emotion should carry a little bit more weight, and I certainly hope they do. Now, I appreciate I haven't said anything in terms of questions, so my question would be, in terms of CCTV and lockup, how is that actually going to come into practice? What times is it going to be open? What times is it going to be shut? Who's enforcing this? The police are not going to be expected to be there all the time. So yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, please.
Councillor Sam McCarthy. Councillor Sam McLean.
Similar, Chair.
Twins.
Gets confusing. There's a Jackie McLean here too, not related. Yeah, I'm not really sure how upsetting the character of the street by removing half the railings will boost the economy. That's come out. That is really puzzling me. I'm wondering if someone could explain that to me. And also the loss of biodiversity and the potential rise in antisocial behaviour, which I think will come of this.
I think Councillor Laws.
I fear I might need this in two parts. I'm not going to argue with historic England. And the key word that I heard from one of the speakers this evening was about accessibility. And so I would like to ask probably Chris to just explain, as he understands the site and the application before us, to just give me a little bit more detail about how these applications will enhance accessibility for people with mobility issues. I'd also, it's a pet project of mine, like to put on the radar and perhaps have an answer to the indicative lighting plans, because one thing that quite frustrates me is when we do public realm works and we improve things and then we have to go in and retrofit stuff because we didn't quite think about every aspect, and lighting sometimes happens. So I note that about 20 years ago or so, the tower was lit at night and it was lit very, very strongly at light. Now I hear what Councillor Gosher has said. My son's favourite superhero is Batman, so I do respect the bats, but I would like to understand about the potential to light the tower in some form for some duration of an evening, because it is a spectacular tower. We all know that. And then to Irene, I just wondered if perhaps you give us a little flavour of some of the challenges of the site, because I understand that about 10 years ago, due to the wildness of it, the wild trees were causing, or the maintenance not happening, was causing rodents to get into the fabric of the building and cause damage, and it was also causing moisture to get into certain places. So I guess the broader point here is, what's the risk to the historic building if we just kick this down the road and say, let the building remain empty for years because we are not prepared to make some minor adaptations to the entire site to make it viable?
Chris, some points there. Over to you, please. The police have submitted one of the longest reports I've ever seen from the police in my years of planning. They've never really bothered before, and they have recommended quite a few issues with the light and the CCTV. And I understand it's going to be linked up to the council's own CCTV department in that, and that the wardens will be responsible for locking up the gates, even though it's an extra cost to the council, because it would be overtime for them. It would make it better if the owners are there or the users are there during the daytime or evening, that they be responsible for locking it up as they won't. But I can see that not happening. But Chris, if you could answer some of the queries brought up by councillors there, please, especially the accessibility by councillor Laws.
And by extension, the accessibility and then the use of that space, because I see an awful lot of public benches in there, which a lot of people who have mobility issues are clearly going to be able to enjoy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, so firstly on the accessibility, then paths will obviously be wider than they exist at the moment. And you've got two areas where you can get in level access and then go into the site and turn at various points. At the moment, the footpaths, if you went on the site visit, you'll see they're pretty narrow, and also they're sort of gravelly, so I don't think you probably wouldn't want to risk a wheelchair currently. Like, you may well get stuck, not be able to turn around, etc. So there's clearly an improvement in terms of accessibility for wheelchairs and people with mobility problems. The footpaths could have been wider, but then there was a balance struck between trying to retain trees, as many gravestones as possible, wildlife, etc. So this was a balance that was struck in terms of accessibility and having discussions with Historic England. So that's why those footpaths are those widths as shown in the plans. In terms of railings removal, they are shown to be removed and various elements of the wall to allow the open aspect of the site, to allow people to sort of sit there and open up the site. If they were retained, and they could be retained, but then the railings aren't historic as such. If they are retained, then that'll reduce accessibility to the site, including during the day. The new gates in their new position would be locked at certain times. That will be covered by the condition we've put in, that was actually detailed in conjunction with lots of discussions with the police. We went back and forward to the police a lot of times saying, what do you think about the detail and the layout? They weren't objecting to the layout, but they did want very careful conditioning about times of opening up the site, various CCTV, that sort of thing. So that condition would need to be applied, and then details would be submitted, and we would liaise with the police and Environment Protection. And also we would have to consider the lighting impact on wildlife. You obviously don't want to affect any bat roosts with bright lights shining on the bat roost. So the illustrative lighting plan is purely that, at this stage, illustrative, and would need to be honed to make sure it does not undermine any of the objectives I've just said. And you'd also have to have an appropriate light level to make sure it doesn't dazzle anyone as well. So that will need careful assessment when details come in. See if there's anything else there. Okay, I'll just leave it at that at the moment. If Simon wants to make any comment.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to respond to the point raised by Councillor Barton, which I think is a really important one, regarding the removal of the section of railings to the side of the south porch, between the south porch and the west tower, and the reasoning behind that. And in essence, that is not only to provide a 24/7 small public space in a very attractive environment, but moreover, it allows functional access to the south porch for users of the building out of hours, so that even during the hours of darkness, when the remainder of the churchyard will be secure, users can enter the church via the south porch without having to negotiate further barriers and lock gates and all the rest of it. So it is very much about facilitating that use of that space, but also providing a shared space for the public to linger and sit and enjoy the sun. Much has been said around the potential for anti-behaviour in that very small area. And as Chris has explained, it will be heavily covered by CCTV. But moreover, members will be familiar with the space outside Timperley's on the other side of the street, almost opposite. Now that in itself is not particularly well overlooked, and it is accessible to the public, but I'm not aware that attracts any antisocial behaviour at all. So I think there are questions around that, but that this space would be very well maintained and would be subject, obviously, to CCTV and constant maintenance by our street wardens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. On the accessibility, just to clarify, the entrance, the new entrance near the back where the library is that to be for wheelchair use with a ramp in? And how do they wheelchair use access the front part of the church? Because there doesn't seem to be a. Do they come through by the porch?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the wheelchair access elements are either side of the porch. Those two access points there. The other access points will have steps, basically. The new gates near the library will have steps, and then the other elements will be the refurbished steps and then steps the other side. But then access obviously wider within the site because of the wider footpaths, essentially.
So if someone in a wheelchair comes in by the porch there, can they access both sides of the site?
Yes, Chairman, if they come into the right-hand side of the porch as you look from Trinity Street, then you could access all of the footpaths in there. And the same applies to the left-hand side of the porch, Trinity Street. You'd go in through where the existing gates are to be reused and then access the footpaths along that way. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Warnes, sorry?
Chairman, I think you really wanted to.
Oh, yeah, sorry, there was a question from Councillor regarding the church, and I think the main issues around the church, like the president, is that there were many trees and vegetation growing very close to the church that caused many problems, caused additionally the drainage system doesn't work properly. There are big issues of rising dams, creation of the walls and the roof, and this scheme is going to give an opportunity to have a proper rainwater management strategy, which can improve the drains and also manage trees and vegetation around the church, which proximity of trees and vegetation affects the fabric. Also, it's also important to note that the railings and the boundary wall at the moment they're in a poor state of repair, and this scheme again is going to give us the opportunity to improve those sections, and of course it's a great improvement. It's going to reflect positively on the setting of the church and the conservation area. And same for the gravestones, some of them are in a very poor state of repair, and this scheme provides for the cleaning and their proper maintenance as well.
Thank you. Does that cover? Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to ask 5 questions based on
on, first of all, the substantial harm considerations, secondly, the protection of public open space from perceived antisocial behaviour, third on parking, fourth on the protection of the heritage asset, and five on accessibility. So on the first one, substantial harm consideration, I wondered if I could ask Chris if he could give a further detailed explanation of how the less than substantial harm conclusion was arrived at, especially for members of the public that may be watching and may not have had the opportunity to have read the agenda in detail like ourselves. And I think it's important that when we're taking decisions, we try to help people understand why and how. And I think further explanation on that is important because the arriving at the less than substantial harm conclusion it looks like that has been the gatekeeper to then going on and considering the wider public benefits. So I think we need to understand that in detail, and I think members of the public need to be given that opportunity as well. My second point is around, we are creating a public open space. We seem to be, the proposals seem to be saying that needs to be 24-hour, but the major user is going to be a voluntary organisation that will be using it within, mostly within normal hours, so as to speak. So basically, I am picking up, as I felt when I read it, concerns about completely removing the railings around that public space. And I wondered whether it is worth going back to the applicants to see whether there's a possible solution where perhaps railings could be drawn across and locked after hours. So therefore you aren't leaving a sort of open space which has got benches on it 24 hours. People are clearly raising concerns about them. Other issues you also get, as we often see within our own wards and around the town, that people will park in all sorts of spaces and justify doing that for all sorts of sort of reasons. So that brings me on to the third point, parking. I noticed there are parking restrictions along Trinity Square. So my understanding is that you can't park beyond those double yellow lines. So that in theory should protect an open public space through people driving their car up there because they consider it very urgent. They just need to pop in to X, Y, or Z in order to actually get something. And that could well happen after hours when there are less people around. So it would be interesting to know what those parking restrictions are. Are they not parking at any time, or are they not parking during certain hours? And my fourth point is around protection of public heritage asset. There is what appears to be a large grave marked N on the plan, and we seem to be moving that a small distance to put it closer to the porch. But that will be within what looks like a smaller public open space that will be open 24 hours a day. And given some of the issues that were documented in the media around the St Mary's graveyard and the nefarious activities that were taking place on tombs there, I wonder whether this is just leaving that particular asset exposed, and would it not be better moved inside a railed area? And obviously, I'd like some more detail on what that would involve, because there may well be a former person interned there, and that may not be considered appropriate to do that. But in terms of trying to protect it from possible abuse, it might be better to put it inside a railed area. And then my fifth point, and final point, is on accessibility. I had a look on Google
maps Street View, and there is a pavement there, and there is a dropped curb where the existing gates are that goes into the side porch, but we're talking about putting in more gates to the other side of the porch, and there is no drop curb. So if we're talking about, you know, accessibility, then obviously that's governed by the 2010 Equality Act, and we should not discriminate against somebody who is disabled in comparison to somebody that's not. So therefore, somebody who's not could easily walk across the street, step up on the curb and go into that new entrance. But unless there's a drop curb there, somebody with a wheelchair, they would find that difficult. And it's not like you are just bending back a pram and then putting the front wheels on and lifting it up with a small person inside that doesn't weigh very much. Somebody sitting in a wheelchair can be several stone, and that would be very difficult for you know, that person's carer to be able to do that unless the wheelchair was actually sort of motorized. And one last comment on the flagging up of the virtues of CCTV in order to prevent antisocial behaviour. What CCTV does facilitate is for whoever the perpetrators are to potentially be caught. So that provides a cure. But what maintaining locked rails would do, that would actually prevent. And as the comments, a number of people have said, that is what has stopped the antisocial behaviour in a number of churchyards around the town. So that just adds weight to, I think it's worth going back to the applicant and saying, could you relook at this? Is it possible to put railings that can be drawn across, secured and locked after hours? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right about the CCTV. It's used now by the moment after an incident has taken place to gather evidence on who they can see has perpetrated that. If you're talking about someone who's used urinated in public, I don't believe the police will actually bother investigating that. Far too much to do, not enough of them to do that. And we haven't got the operators to sit there all night and all day to watch out in that area. There's far too much going on. So really it's just an evidence gathering thing afterwards, but we'll do that. But Chris, could you address Councillor Ward's other points that he's raised up, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, in terms of less than substantial harm, I'd have to draw your attention to the recommendation from Historic England, which Simon has alluded to before, where the Historic England supports the application of heritage grounds and considers the proposal meet the requirements of the NPPF. So that does allow alterations to heritage assets if the public benefits outweigh less than substantial harm to those assets. And the comment from the Conservation Officer is also clear that there are not objections to the impact upon heritage assets. There are considered to be significant public benefits which would allow the accessibility and improvement of the public realm, and also, as Irini said before, the enhancement and improvement and restoration of some of the railings and some of the walling, and also some of the gravestones themselves. So it's considered to accord with the NPPF in terms of the judgment on less than substantial harm, and also with our own local plan policies in that respect. In terms of the public open space and the railings, well, the scheme is to open up that area for the public realm. Obviously, having railings and sliding railings would undermine that aim if they are sort of, sliding across at an earlier time than was proposed. It's not an impossibility that could happen, but it's obviously not part of the scheme that's put forward to you at this stage. The point about the gravestone to the left of the porch, yes, that I note that it is more in the public realm, I suppose there could be potential to recite that so that it could be protected from being open and available to the public if that is something that is really desired. If it's put behind railings, then there could be the potential to do that and help protect it and not be available to the public all the time. In terms of accessibility, yes, the 2 new access points do not have wheelchair access. If they did, you'd probably need them to be a fair bit wider, and there's quite a lot of groundworks there as well, because certainly on the side of the library, there are differing heights there, and you'd probably have to widen and then have wider and more depth to the footpaths. There could be an impact upon trees and vegetation. I think the same would apply to the new access gates and steps on the other side at Pelham's Lane. So I think the scheme in that respect was put forward to achieve a balance between protecting heritage assets and protecting wildlife and protecting trees, whilst still giving access to people who are wheelchair bound on the other areas adjacent to the tower. So I think a balance was struck in that respect. And as I said previously, the footpaths are considered to be adequate for wheelchair bound users to actually go along them and then to turn at various points. But it is a balance in that respect. I think that probably covers the points, but if you want me to say anything else, then yeah, please.
Yep, thank you.
Raise.
Yeah, may I come back? Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to come back on the accessibility point. That what I'm talking about is the new entrance that will be made in the public space where the grave marked N is. And when you look at the current Google Maps picture of that street, there is no drop curb there. Okay, there is one further down, and presumably that will be kept because that will give access onto the enlarged public space. But on the one which is the other side of the front porch, there is no drop curb. So I would suggest that that would be beneficial to somebody using a wheelchair. And also, if you look at it from the perspective of a wheelchair user, if an able-bodied person is able to walk into the entrance I've just talked about, walk through the churchyard and walk out the other side on to Trinity Square, but the wheelchair user has to turn around and come back out of the same entrance they're coming. That is disadvantaging them compared to somebody that isn't disabled. So where you've got what looks like the actual open space next to Trinity Square and comes into the stepped access, is it not possible to create a ramped access? So the ramp goes up the space immediately left as you come in and then turns around and the wheelchair user comes back down to the path. And that would also be access into the side door into the church. So I wondered whether it's possible to put a disability compliant access in there. And then that would give the wheelchair user the same freedom as an able-bodied person to be able to pass through the graveyard unhindered. And I think that would better meet our duty to make reasonable adjustments under the 2010 Equality Act, which is an ongoing and an anticipatory duty. Thank you.
So,
yes, Chair. I think Councillor Warnes is referring to the stepped access to the side of the library building. No. The problem we have with creating ramps is that they are immensely disruptive in terms of both archaeology and tree roots. As Chris has explained, we've tried to adopt a very light touch throughout the scheme to avoid disturbing precious archaeology and harming trees. A fully compliant ramp would have to be 1 in 20, which would be a very substantial construction and potentially would affect, I would imagine, very considerable amounts of archaeology within the graveyard and also potentially tree roots. I do get the point with regard to maximising accessibility, but that has to be weighed against what is reasonable and can be achieved without harming other interests. And I do think that the overall increase in accessibility is very substantial from this scheme, and all accessibility from all of these points, including the steps at Pelham's Lane and the alleyway to the side of the library, just isn't possible because of the changes in level and the resultant ramps and the impacts on tree roots and archaeology that would result. It would be a very much more substantial impact, and as we've explained, the whole ethos of the scheme is to have a very light touch on the nature of the graveyard, on its archaeology, and on its character. Ramps do tend to feel like heavily engineered structures when they're often introduced, and in this instance, I think that you would be creating many problems that would be quite difficult to reconcile.
So if you're a wheelchair user, you come on the little footpath from Trinity Street, and you enter in where the porch is now, which you're saying they can actually access from the footpath, but there'll be no steps or anything. They can go straight in, and they go round, but they have to come back out the same way again. And have you assessed where you put the benches, that there won't be any blockages in there, that they'll be able to turn round within the graveyard and come back out again? Is that good?
Yes, the path is 1.5 metres in width, so it does allow for wheelchair users to turn.
Thank you. Martin, you happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, Simon has pointed out why he didn't think it's possible, and it is the balance of harm. It isn't ideal for someone who is a wheelchair user. It does make them feel like they're different to somebody that is more able-bodied, but Simon has pointed out the archaeological difficulties in doing that, and I have to trust that the officers have made the right balance. Chair, you'll be moving to a vote soon, I take it, and I wonder whether it's worth just testing the will of the committee to see whether there is an appetite to actually defer the application to see whether a more acceptable solution to members of the public and their representatives can be found in relation to the actual railings and not closing off the open space.
I'm not sure if we're really ready there yet. There's a couple of questions that they never answered. The one was the street park at Trinity Street. If I remember from a planning application years ago, we changed, or highways changed the access, so there wasn't any parking at all, because that was used by lorries to deliver early in the morning. So I think they said no parking down Trinity Street. There'd be drop-offs, and it was limited to when they could do it. That's my memory. But yours is a better one than mine, if you can remember that far back. I'm sure we put some restrictions in to allow a free flow, so that I think at the time some cars were parking down there, and that removed that problem. But
I mean, all I can say, Chair, is I'm not aware of any parked cars at the moment on that stretch of Trinity Street.
Because of what
there must be parking restrictions.
Because of the restrictions they brought in, so they weren't going to do that. Great.
I'm sure there must be active parking restrictions. I have never seen a parked car down there ever.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I think it's a very valid point, but
members, can we just have one meeting? Excuse me. If you've got something to say, you have to do by microphone. And any questions, ask the officers, not a chat amongst yourselves.
I apologise, Chairman. I'm not a regular to this committee and the way you conduct it, so I do apologise. I was just pointing out to Councillor here that where there would be potential concerns around a car parking in a new public realm space, there is actually 2 bollards being proposed in the plan, which would stop that from happening.
Correct. And just a reminder that we do have the public space protection order in place. It makes it illegal to drink alcohol in the public space, which is enforceable by our civil wardens. But I don't think the police have been given the power to do that, if I remember correctly. But there we are. Councillor Davison.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The debate's gone on quite a long while, so I'll try and be brief. I fully accept the concerns of the public speakers, but actually, for me, this is a town centre open space. It's the footfall around Trinity Square is high at all times. It's an asset to the city. What I'd like to say is that I think this scheme actually improves that open space. If you look at the other closed churchyards that we've got in the town, they're generally neglected because obviously there's nobody using them. And I think that to have this continued as a neglected space doesn't do anything for the town realm. The only thing I have got concerns with is I thought there was a soldier buried here from a sailor buried here from Trafalgar. And I just wanted to make sure that grave was being left intact and perhaps signed up to show that. And the other thing was to the west, where you've got the footway going along Trinity Street, surely that will have to be dropped in 2 or 3 places, because otherwise you can't use the access either side of the tower.
And I had all my questions. I'd forgotten. I'd heard there was a Napoleonic soldier, either from Waterloo or Trafalgar.
Or Trafalgar.
He fought in the Battle of Trafalgar in the victory, and he would have received a medal, and he's buried in that churchyard. Anyone know any historians? It's a Bob, of course you wouldn't know that. But is there such a man there? And obviously, he's a bit of a hero. So over to you.
Chairman, should I just? Yes, in the heritage assessment, it's stated that the works to the graveyard don't affect anyone of historic significance laid in the churchyard, and reference is made to the person from the Battle of Trafalgar, so impact on that gravestone and tomb is avoided, basically.
Well, that's good. And you've got an information board going. Would the details of this person be entered onto the information? Because it is historical fact, and he fought in an historical. We did the work in the Priory with the soldier there, which was great, and I was involved in that. But it would be nice to acknowledge what this person had done and was buried there. So, Councillor Davison, have you got the form of the proposal?
I have, although there's one other thing. I was going to back up the Councillor Warnes's extra access for disability. And the one opposite the library is, you see the steps actually quite a way into the churchyard. I just wonder whether that could conform with disability as a slope. It looks like you've got room there to make a long enough slope. But I'd like to propose that we actually accept this, subject to dusk closing, like we do in the Colchester Cemetery along the Mersey Road. It opens at different times in the summer and the winter. So at dusk it would be shut, and that would stop any evening behaviour. And also that if
any potential for disability access opposite the library was able to be done, I'd like that to be included. But otherwise, accept it as it was.
So before we go to the second, the access where the library is, when we did the site visit, it was quite high, and the ramp would have to be fairly steep. So bearing in mind, we now have a proposal of Councillor Davison. Have I got a second? You need to speak and say it, Darris.
I will second it.
You. And you will accept the application as it is here tonight, and no extra conditions? With the closures, dusk till dawn?
Yep, closed at dusk every, in the winter and summer.
Is that acceptable, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can have a specific condition relating to the hours of closing to be agreed by the council in conjunction with liaison with the police.
Yes, Chairman, just to butt in, that would have been covered under the existing condition we've got in terms of details of management and opening. Probably what we need to be a bit careful of, if the police say they want it to be closed earlier than that, for example, then we need to look at that. So, but we take the point about dusk, and I think we could say that that's essentially the minimum that we would ask for, and if the police want it closed earlier, then we could still have the flexibility to do that.
Yes, and I noticed in the police report they've asked for us to come back to them with the proposals for the closing of the times, so we could do that. If they're not happy with that, will we give the officers the powers to sort out the times with the police? A delegation of powers, I think you still have. Is that acceptable? Is that acceptable to everyone? Well, I was going to go to the vote, but
It's a bit late now.
over to you, Roger.
I just noticed that on the lighting, it says all sources are low output, 2,700K or warmer. Now, as a lighting guy, I know very well what 2,700K, which is the temperature of lighting, it's brown. It's a brown light. I say brown, I use those words advisedly, but it certainly isn't high intensity. It isn't even anywhere near blue. Can I ask that lighting, the applicants go back to their design and revisit that temperature and suggest that we talk about anything higher than between 3 and 4,000, 3 and 4K. Because that is going to be, I mean, you're talking about street lights, which are blue. They are round about, the ones out here are probably about 5 to 6K. Now, I'm not saying that we need those sorts of intensities, but we certainly do need a higher intensity than 2,700K. I'm sorry. Thank you.
And I also believe that in the police report, they've asked for that to come back to them as well. And for environmental protection, we'll look at whether there's any potential harmful to the residents nearby. So we could do that the same with the hours, that it could be worked out between environmental protection and the police. That's...
Yes, Chairman, just in terms of lighting, need to make sure that the bats are not impacted as well in terms of lighting level. So it may be that you have a lower level of lighting by the tower, for example, and then higher around elsewhere. So that would need to be carefully looked at.
But would the lights, because they'll be quite low, would the lights be good enough for the CCTV that's put in place?
I think we'd have to rely on police advice for that, Chairman, see what they thought.
Okay, well, we can ask for infrared lights, cameras to go in, because that does cover all that, which we've had it before.
Can I just say, sorry, Mr. Chairman, 2,700K is not good enough for good CCTV.
Well, if the light isn't good enough, and we have the same problem down Eld Lane, that we put in infrared cameras in there, and the light, you didn't leave the light, it picked up everything, moved around. So it is possible now with modern technology to move forward, but environmental protection will look at it. The police will see our proposals, and if it's not good enough, then they will say, we'll go with that. So, Councillor Warnes, make it quick.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wanting to just try and nail down that the feasibility, wherever practical, of moving the tomb marked N into an enclosed space is actually conditioned in some way.
Chris?
Yes, Chairman. So are you referring to the area to the right of the porch or to the left?
If you are viewing it from Trinity Street,
Yeah.
standing sideways on to the left.
And that was accessibility to the gravestone, is that right?
No, that's the tomb marked N, which is going to be moved closer to the porch, and I would like to see it moved into a railed area, so it's not permanently open to the public.
I think at this stage I don't see any technical reason why that couldn't happen. It could be something that could be conditioned, I would say.
I'd be grateful, Chair.
Simon, are you happy with that?
Again, Chairman, we've tried to adopt a very light touch to keeping as far as possible the grave markers in there as close as possible to their existing locations. As far as I can recall, it's quite a hefty thing, this tomb chest, and I'm not terribly convinced that it would suffer damage just from normal exposure to the public realm. You know, it is a chunky thing, and it does seem to be a shame to remove it from its being very close to its existing location, unless that's absolutely necessary. What we could do, Chair, should problems arise at a later date, we could put an informative on that we'll review the maintenance and management of the site. Should any problems occur, I totally get the point that Councillor Warnes is raising, and we could move it subsequently.
Sounds good. A lot of them are held together by moss and vines and that. Okay, so now we're ready to. We're now ready to go to the vote, colleagues. And it's proposed by Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Laws, that we accept all the conditions in the report, plus the opening hours will be cleared by the police. We recommended certain ones, and also for the police to look at the light situation with environmental and to sort that out with the CCTV, so it's all workable.
And to add the informative.
And sorry, okay?
And to add the informative just discussed.
Yes. So we've got two votes. We now have to vote on 7.1 and 7.2. So on 7.1, all those in favour of approving the application? Those against? And those abstaining? One. So the application is approved on that. Now we moved on to 7.2 with the same conditions and everything we set out. All those in favour of the approval, please place your hands up.
6, Chair.
For those against?
That's 4, Chair.
And no abstentions. So that application is now, both of them have been approved, and now we'll move on. I suggest we take a short break. 5 minutes, please. And I think Councillor Laws has to go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. We have lost Councillor Laws. He's had another engagement go to later, so that's just noted. And just a reminder to members, the declarations of interest tonight, if you do have anything on the applications left, please declare those interests now. If you've forgotten something on the applications that we have of the land to the west of Laird de la Haye, Folly Road, and also on St Bottle Street, or Queen Street, sorry. No, that's wrong. Yeah, St Bottle Street. No, are we all right? Okay, just a reminder. Thank you. So now we move on to 7.3, land to the west of the Follies, Laird de la Haye. We have Daniel Cooper to present. For, nobody against. Public for is Robert Eburn, and we have Councillor Ellis with a statement if we need it. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, this is an application for site land west of the Folly, Laird de la Haye. The application follows two outlines combined for the main site and the rural exception site and master planned into this one application for 70 dwellings, including 24 affordable homes. So this is the site, red line site outline here. I will point out the obvious here that the up is north on this one, only because other documents I've had to rotate them to get them all in. So I will point that out as we go along. So here is the proposed site layout plan with the entrance onto the Folly here. That would be the east there, so north is the right of the page. Zoomed in to the top half of the site, you'll notice that there are the dots here. The red dots are for the affordable homes, and going back one, the blue dots are shared ownership. The purple dots you see are the rural exception sites, affordable rent and shared ownership. So you'll see these as we move into the zoomed in parts of the site there. And there's the lower half of the site with the access onto the Folly. So this is a Google satellite view just to show the Folly is over here where my cursor is. The main access is over in this direction, but there will be a pedestrian footpath access onto Great House Farm Road there and onto Old Forge Road there. And to put into context, they give access over to the primary school as well as other services and areas over here. This document shows the existing power lines running along the side of the site. They are already there, and notice that they do not cover any of the proposed dwellings or the garden areas. And the next few pages are some examples of some of the proposed dwellings there, the mixture of designs and materials there. So some here, but that's showing a bungalow. That's one of the more executive ones. Some of those are to the frontage as well, which I'll show in a minute. Some of these. And that's another executive one. So this is a mock-up street scene of representation of the area around where the access onto the Folly will be. So there's a green sward, if you remember from the map, with the dwellings set back. This is the mock-up representation of what that might look like with the design of dwellings proposed there. And there is another one further along it. So they are set back from the main highway of the Folly. So these site photos, first of all, we're at Great House Farm Road, where one of the footpath accesses will be. And then I'm looking east towards the access, which where my cursor is, it's in the distance there. We will see it closer up in a minute, but it is just around there. Then I'm looking northeast, basically rotating around on the spot here, to the north, to the northwest, and then to the west. Then this is the access point on the Folly. The existing access there will be the main access onto the site, to and from the site. and then that's the folly looking north and south with the access in the side there for some context. Okay, the reason this is being brought to committee is it is a departure from policy SS10, Ley de la Haye, in that the policy states there should be a children's play area. That has been omitted due to requests from the Parish Council at the outline applications previously. Also, the policy wants two accesses there, with the main access was meant to go through Great House Farm Road. Now, obviously, that has been removed, and the main and only road access is to and from the folly. And the other one is the rural exception site has now been master planned into the entire proposal. So it is part of the site was technically outside of the village envelope. That's the presentation. I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll take the speakers first. So can I call up Robert Eburn, please, who's speaking for the application?
Thank you, Chairman.
They're off, oh, sorry, I couldn't see the red light. Sorry, we left his mic on. Oh, you have 3 minutes, the bell will go after 2 when you're ready to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Planning Manager with Denbury Homes. The plans presented to you today consolidate and improve upon the 2 outline planning permissions for 15 and 55 homes approved on this site on the 18th of October 2022. In granting those applications, you expressed a desire to see both sites master planned into a single comprehensive sustainable development. I'm very pleased to say that this objective is being fulfilled as per the Planning Officer's recommendation this evening. To retrace the origins of the proposal, the site was first identified as being suitable for residential development in 2017 and was later allocated in the local plan, with part of the site already identified as a rural exception site. In spring 2023, we discussed our plans with the Parish Council and promised to preserve the benefits of the previous schemes, such that this detailed application provides 34% affordable housing and a continued dedication to the pilot local lettings policy, which will see all of the affordable housing reserved to those in housing need within the immediate locality. Furthermore, the community funds from Denbury Homes for village hall and recreation ground improvements are preserved, with a promise that these will now be paid at the commencement of the development. Additionally, the proposal provides library and vital NHS funding, which were previously absent from the approved Section 106. Before acquiring the site, we reviewed correspondences on both planning permission files and noted that the majority expressed concerns about the use of Great House Farm Road as vehicular access. It is for this reason that we propose the development be accessed via the approved access off the folly, but with cycle, pedestrian and emergency access available as a through route to Great House Farm Road. As committee members, you will note that many beneficial planning applications lack supporting representations, but here there are 24 separate letters of support expressing support for the access arrangements, with a further 20 expressing some doubts about the principle of development, while supporting the access plans which are fully endorsed by the Highway Authority. We've amended the layout to agree with the particular requirements of the Highway Authority. In turn, they state that from a highway transportation perspective, the impact of the proposal is acceptable. We look forward to working with the community as we move forward to deliver a high-quality development which will be an enduring, green, inclusive and sensitively designed addition to the village. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And then we've got a statement read by one of the ward councillors, Councillor Ellis. As soon as Robert's ready, he'll read that out for us.
Thank you, Chair. So this statement is from Councillor Ellis and Councillor Bentley. Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for taking a few moments to hear what Councillor Bentley and I have to say with regard to this application. We have had an involvement with this allocation site for over 8 years. During that time, working with the Parish Council on behalf of residents, we met with the previous applicant's Tollgate Partnership, who had strong local connections to the village. On a number of occasions I have lost count of the number of roundtable meetings with officers, the parish council and Tollgate Partnership that we attended. Councillor Bentley spoke at a village meeting about this development at its inception, and I did likewise about 5 years ago. These development plans have been a long time in gestation. The committee granted outline approval for 70 homes back in 2022. Since then, Tollgate Partnership has sold the site to Denbury Homes. They did not sell to just any developer. Denbury was chosen with care because the Tollgate Partnership wished to see the site developed sensitively and as well as they would have hoped. Looking at the plans before you this evening, it appears that Denbury have fulfilled that brief. I cannot hand on heart claim that they meet with universal approval in Layer de la Haye. Most people dislike change, and this development will change the outlook for a number of people. It will increase the number of residents in the village calling on its facilities and services, such as they are, and it will inevitably increase traffic flows. That said, the site is allocated in the local plan, and 70 homes will be built on it, come what may. I happen to believe that if we are able to see a development on the site, then the one before you is a pretty good one. I know that as a committee you will determine this on the planning grounds, and I know that amalgamating the rural exception site into the main scheme is a plan departure, but it's one that makes sense and should be welcomed. The developer has also paid great attention to the numerous submissions made by residents to outline applications and has changed the access arrangements as a result. The saying goes, you can't please all the people all the time, but this change has been a positive one that has pleased many. As ward councillors, we have always worked with the parish council to try and ensure that any benefits of development are reaped by the local community, and the issues caused by the development can be mitigated. I know that people tend to look at the negatives, but development done well can bring positives too. The inclusion of a rural exception site was one such positive. It was the result of much work by the parish council, ward councillors and officers, providing affordable housing for Layer residents and their families in perpetuity. It must be viewed as an incredibly positive thing. In addition to the 8 affordable units in the rural exception scheme, there will be an additional 16 affordable units within the main scheme. I am grateful to officers and the applicant for agreeing to maintain the pilot scheme for a policy which is the then portfolio holder for housing and planning I wish to introduce for Colchester. I referred to it as communities that grow together, stay together. As a policy title that might sound a tad corny, but in my opinion it's imperative that rural communities accepting growth should see very tangible benefits from that growth. This is one of those. With rising costs of living and property, particularly rural property, in short supply, the need for access to affordable housing in our village communities has never been greater. Affordable housing that ensures that families can stay close to one another is a tremendous benefit both socially, economically and environmentally. This development will afford the opportunity to a large number of people in Layer de la Haye and villages local to Layer de la Haye to remain close to their support network and families and friends, providing something demonstrably positive for the rural community development. And with development comes some financial planning mitigation for Layer, which will see much needed improvements to the village hall, the play area, which, it should be noted, is sufficiently close to the development to negate the need for an on-site play area, and a variety of schemes around the village which will improve it for current residents and its new ones. Chairman and committee members, whilst few like change, and we would all prefer that this land remain undeveloped, we are where we are. You are looking at plans for an allocated site this evening, and as ward councillors we feel that this is an acceptable scheme.
Thank you very much, and I think that I'm a great fan of the rural lettings scheme. There should be in every application. There's still in the pipeline, I think, working that you have to be commended for doing that and putting in this application. So on that, any question, Councillor Jackie McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I only have one issue with this application. I know it's been on the back burner for a while now to develop this part of Layer, but I do feel with this amount of houses we should still have a play area for that part of the development. There is nothing on the old 70s development, and I think we do need something coming forward, even if it's small, just to give them a choice that they don't have to cross the very busy Layer Road to go to the other play areas. You know, I think we need to be mindful of that and fair to the residents that are actually going to be coming here, which they're very big, you know, they're nice family homes, and they'll all have, you know, hopefully have children. So I think we need to be, I think that's the only fair way of going forward. If we, you know, that's the only way I would support it, if we could incorporate some form of a play area on there. And even if we can have some money to fund it for the parish council if they can't afford it for a bit. So, 106, yeah.
Well, the parish council have put this into the plans themselves, and you've heard the ward councillors also support that suggestion that no play areas put in there, and the money is spent on revamping the one they've got at the moment. So what your suggestion is,
I think they
overruling the parish council?
No, okay. Go on.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak from being an ex-parish council. The one thing that wound us up was the borough council ignored everything that we wanted. And Robin knows where I'm coming from. But I'll hand it over to Councillor Davison.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Yes, Chairman, it'd be really helpful if we could see a Google map of the Layer site, including the primary school and the existing playground, because it is a long way away. And actually, I support what Councillor McLean is saying. The original 106, the original outline application included a playground. I appreciate that the parish council are saying they'll refresh the existing one, but if we put a playground in this estate, that actually services the other estates on the east side of the Layer Road. It would serve an awful lot of people. I think if you see it on Google, you'd see how far it would be to actually get to the existing one. Also, I noticed that in 9.1, the parish council are still saying, please put the underground, high voltage underground cable, electricity underground. Can I just, personal point of view, I'm currently putting an 11,000 volt cable underground with the support of UK Power Networks, and they're very obliging, and if they feel it's to the benefit of the community or businesses, they will do that. So I think, that would make it so much nicer and also increase the area of open space as well.
And you're happy to put it in and put on the cost of the maintenance of the new play area onto the parish council as well, even though they don't want it?
There is funding available for parish councils. We've just refreshed ours in Peldon, and you can get grants from all sorts of sources. I think there's enough houses and enough new people coming into the village and serving the existing playgrounds, existing estates. Please look at the Google map and see what you think, Chairman.
Daniel, is that possible to show where we are? Thank you.
So there's the Folly site there where my cursor is. And over there to the west is the field. And there's the footpaths here and here on Old Forge Road and Great House Farm Road for the access over into this area. That is, yep, there we go. There. Well, yeah, bottom of that green space there.
So it looks pretty walkable then from where the people are, or am I judging it wrong?
About 420 metres as the crow flies.
Let's see if all those little darlings to walk.
I can't measure it in a pathway, sorry.
Chairman, the point I'm really making is that the majority of built housing in Layer is all on this side of the Layer, the east side of the Layer Road. And the Layer Road B1026 is busier and busier going to the reservoir. And I just think it makes sense to have a playground in both places and the underground cable. The other thing I was going to point out, please, I believe there's another footpath going north of Le Bois, across the bottom of across the north of the site, and that may even be a shorter route, perhaps. The other last issue is that the Folly is a very narrow road. There are no footways on it at all, and everybody will have to use these footpaths because that's the only way that cars get out onto the Folly. But everybody else has got to use the footpaths.
Daniel, I think the cable will also come up. Could that be put underground? As referred to like that, could be a good idea.
The developer has confirmed that if it is required, it could be arranged for it to be buried under the ground, yes.
I think that probably is required, actually, if I want. Councillor Warren's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concern is play area, and many of the points that I would express have been said, that you've got the bulk of the Layer community to the east side, of which we are now adding to it, and without the play area, which is part of our policy. I appreciate the parish council's view, and I listen to their view, but I think in this particular instance, our policy should hold. A children's play area should be built. Robert makes a good point that it would then serve the bulk of the village, rather than them having to walk through the estate and cross over at what is becoming an ever increasing crossroads. And there's a lot of visitors that go through to the reservoir, and people cut across from the in order to get up to the Tiptree Malden Road as well. So I think it would be beneficial to build a play area, and if Jackie is proposing it, I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Jackie, are you proposing that? And just make another the conditions that you want the underground table to go underground, and for the, so we'll have to go back to the developer to design a playground area. I've never known. Simon, can we?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we could do this by a condition, the provision of a play area, if members are so minded. And similarly, if you wish us to pursue the undergrounding of the pole cable line, we can also seek to secure that. There is no need for it to come back to committee as long as you're happy with delegating that to officers to deliver. Thank you.
Okay, so right then we have the proposal, and the seconder is Councillor Warnes. All those in favour? Yep.
Sorry, Chair, for interrupting right before we go. So can I just clarify the actual proposal, though, is to approve the application subject to delegation, that as child play area of description is provided, and that the underground cables, the cables are buried underground. Is that, have I got that correct? Yeah.
Chair,
I think we have, so we're ready to.
It might be worth noting that the play area will conform with the council's policy. Okay.
Would you like, perhaps they should consult all the villages and the children what sort of design they want. We'll come back in another 10 years' time. Okay, so we're ready to vote on what we've just discussed. All those in favour of that application and conditions?
7.
Are those against?
2.
Abstaining? No. So that's passed then, and it goes back, to put in a play area, no one wants. Thank you, Daniel, for that. And now we move on to 7.4, 4 St Bottles Street in Colchester. Daniel Bird is the presenting officer. Public against John Burton. Public for Sam Good. And we've got Councillor Goss as a visiting councillor. Over to you, Daniel, to present the case, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. Tonight's item is number 4, St Botolph Street. It concerns a part retrospective planning permission is sought for the replacement of timber sash windows with UPVC sash windows, which will be painted black. The top of the sash windows at the front corner are to be curved to match the style of the original windows. New timber door with surround pilaster is to be reinstated, like for like, rendered masonry on the side elevation. In addition, the reinstatement of the historic parapet and clock to the front elevation. This is a resubmission of refused application 231370, and this application aims to overcome the previous concerns. The site occupies a corner plot between Vineyard Street and St Botolph's. The building is locally listed and within the Colchester Conservation Area 1. Here are the existing elevations. Here are the proposed elevations illustrating the siting of the parapet and clock, the arched head to the corner windows, and the intention of the proposed UPVC windows to be painted black. Here is the proposed side elevation, side door details facing Vineyard Street, featuring a projecting cornice with details, traditional panel door, and surrounding pilasters as to be reinstated, informed from historic photographs. Here is a photograph taken of the original side door with the detailed surround elements in comparison to the proposed reinstated versions secured as part of this application. The proposed parapet wall, clock and detailing have been informed from historic photographs taken of the site in the early 19th century, including the reinstatement of the absent ball finial. Here are photographs of the existing building showing the corner windows, current side door arrangement, and the black painted frames along Vineyard Street. Here is the existing side door with the proposed elevations outlined. Here is a plan indicating the presence of UPVC windows surrounding the application site currently within the conservation area. It should be noted that these sites do not currently benefit from planning permission, but the context is worth noting. Further examples of such windows, including one which is directly opposite the application site. It is also noted that black painted frames are present within the wider conservation area. These are such examples. The proposal is considered to represent less than substantial harm to the non-designated heritage asset and wider conservation area. As such, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of this proposal. This application would secure the reinstatement of the parapet, clock, and ball finial. In addition, the corner windows would feature arched heads, as previously requested by this committee, with the side, door, and surround being enhanced. As a result, this application is recommended to members for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. And now we move over to the speakers. John Burton, please. So before John,
Thank you, Chairman. I speak on behalf of Colchester Civic Society. Sorry, I'm being disturbed.
Sorry, any more of that, and we'll ask you to leave the meeting, please. Nice and quiet, thank you.
May I carry on, sir? Do I get my time back?
I think that we have reset it and you can start again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I speak on behalf of Colchester Civic Society. I have an MBE for services to the conservation of historic architecture. I served as chair of the Georgian Group, one of the learned societies, and chaired its planning group. I sit on several other building conservation related committees, particularly related to churches. Preserving historic detail and material is the only way, even for the most modest buildings, to retain their character and the character of a conservation area. The retention of historic buildings and areas' character in Colchester is vital to the tourist trade. Your committee papers references 3 earlier planning applications relating to 4 St Botolph Street in Colchester Conservation Area 1. The first application, 171671, for conversion of the upper floor to 3 flats, was approved with several conditions, one relating to the windows being discussed tonight, and I quote condition 7 for that approval. The existing windows shall not be removed, replaced or altered in any way. Any extra glazing, etc. shall be placed internally. Reason, the window is to this locally listed building are original and form part of its character and positive contribution to Colchester Conservation Area. End of the quote. An application 250533 approved the increase in the number of flats from 3 to 5. Clause 7 quoted remained in force by an informative attached to that approval. However, the applicant had already gone against the planning condition, removed the white painted timber windows, replacing them with white UPVC. The planning application 231370, just like this one, sought to maintain the UPVC windows in contravention of the condition quoted. It was refused. By implication, this action was calling to reinstatement of the timber windows. I'm advised several homeowners in Colchester conservation areas have been made to reinstate wooden windows when they have ignored planning permission. Planners have to consider the public benefit para 202 NPPF against the harm that a proposal will have on a designated heritage asset. It has been suggested to me that the harm could be financial, which may have an impact on the nighttime economy. I cannot subscribe to that, as converting a disused building into 5 flats would add considerable value to any similar property. So we're not sure what public benefit can be achieved to allow you to consider granting approval, especially NPP para 199, which you'll have to consider, and I quote, but all harm to designated heritage assets is undesirable and should be avoided wherever possible. Please refuse. Incidentally, early 20th century photographs suggest the timber window frames were painted white. It's also important to recall the hard work that councillors and officers put in when securing lists of locally listed buildings and not wasting it by granting permission to change the character of one of them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And now we move on to public floor speaker. Sam, please. And Sam, you know the procedure. We'll start when you start.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for having me again tonight. So I will speak from a level of frustration following the previous Planning Committee meeting in which this application was rejected after long discussion. And in particular, one comment from one member of the committee who found it appropriate to call this businessman disgraceful, which I think in future is quite shocking, personally. Today it's confirmed the UK has returned to a recession. When is it that we become a place that empowers businesses to invest? Because it currently feels like we are not. Often referred to the former Odeon building or the previous management of Jumbo by its owner to let the buildings fall into a state of disrepair. Yet on this occasion, we have a businessman who is investing heavily in a large prominent building to extend its life as a premises and a property, one that has recently been referenced as a location needing to level up and require investment from its premises, be it all whatever political spectrum you're from. Last meeting, sorry, let me go back. The planning department has recommended this application to be approved, stating very clearly that it is considered there is less than substantial adverse harm impact on the conservation area designation. When weighed up, are considered on balance to outweigh the less than substantial harm to the conservation area. Although I have zero interest in highlighting businesses that have not followed the correct planning permission route tonight, you do not have to look far to see UPVC windows scattered in locations that they shouldn't be. But the current planning committee process looks to penalise those that are looking to gain planning permission. As referenced in the previous planning committee, a resident is permitted to change their wooden windows in most locations within the conservation area for UPVC without planning, but a business isn't, therefore evidencing further levels of bias against businesses in the current city centre. The current local listed building list is inaccessible to public and worth noting from the council, so if you were to look for that local listed, you actually can't access it at the moment. And finally, I will note frustration which has been raised at the previous meeting. That previously we've invited the Civic Society, both myself and Oz, on the 1st of December to a meeting to find a resolution to this, which was rejected sadly and not taken up. And I find it quite frustrating that on this occasion we've got one single objector, and on the previous committee meeting we had 3 members of this organisation vote against the application. I understand there's processes of conflict that have been raised, and I completely understand that process, but I think it's really appropriate to raise because it feels quite persistent. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Goss, please. Then you have 5 minutes. Sure you're into the 4.
Good evening. The reason I'm looking at this application, because it's not in Mile End, is because Ozzy is a resident in Mile End and came to me as a resident, asked me to give an impartial, fact-based view of this application, which is what I've done forensically. I'm a little embarrassed actually about the way this has been handled. Looking at this, having done my own site visit as well, looking at the windows, looking at the concerns, looking at the objections online this evening, there seems to be no material planning reasons to reject this. The planning officer has spent many hours on this and has recommended it for approval, and that was also in the case of the previous application. And I needn't remind any member of the committee, if you are a member of the Civic Society or any other association, that has to be declared. And I haven't seen any declarations to that tonight. So I'm just reminding councillors, if they haven't, they must. And it's also been called out by the chair. So having visited the site, what I can only see is a high quality development, which is complying with everything the planning officers have asked for, including the reinstatement clock, the quality wooden front door. The flats have been developed to a high standard, and there is no harm or detriment to the local area. It's only improved it. Queen Street is known as Kebab Alley, is known as needing serious regeneration, and that's why the master plan has been created to pretty much bulldoze much of Queen Street and the surrounding area to completely regenerate it with tens of millions of pounds of investment that is needed. And here we have an independent businessman who is investing serious amounts of money at a time when we're contracting in the economy. So I can find any serious reason why we should object to this as a planning authority this evening or as a committee. And the fact is, if you do, you need to come up with material planning considerations and the potential for defending an appeal at cost to the public. So that's another thing to bear in mind at a time when councils have no money. Having looked at the objections, they all seem to be pretty much a cut and paste. There are 3 objections. Obviously they're anonymous, but they all look the same. Some words changing. And then the main objector is the Civic Society. Now the Civic Society does great work in the city, but on this occasion I obviously have a disagreement over the approach, and it's a shame that a meeting and a compromise wasn't come to. So I think the planning officer has done a good job. I think the planning team has done the best job they can with this, and I would say to the committee that I don't find any reason for you to object to this on any planning grounds under the MPPF or the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. And if you do, then it will go to appeal and you will probably lose at cost to this council. So just bear those in mind, please, when deliberating.
Thank you very much. Daniel, was there any issues around there? One thing I wanted to bring up was you had the pictures up before of around the area where you had black windows, PC ones in. They should have applied for planning permission from how long they've been there, and they've just been replaced by the people who own it. Well, there have been no objections whatsoever brought up for that. And also the same with further on down Queen Street, is that correct? Now if we're going to play a fair playing game, all of those people who have illegal windows should be written to and be replaced if we're going to incur all the regulations and that, or we can use common sense and allow things to happen. So have I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. The intention is, as a result of those unauthorised works, to provide a level playing field, as you suggest. We will pursue enforcement action where applicable in those cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Davison.
Chairman, I'd like to admit that my wife and I are members of the Civic Society. Having said that, we joined when we were mayor and mayoress. We've never ever attended any of their events. We've never communicated with them, but we are still currently members. But as we saw on the application for Holy Trinity, I don't necessarily agree with their views.
I think it, yes, correct, please.
So if you bear with me one moment, Chair, I'll just get up. So members will have received earlier today an email from myself after correspondence was received. Earlier today, I spoke to the monitoring officer regarding this item, and a note was sent to all members regarding interests for this meeting. So my computer appears to have frozen, so I'll work off of memory for a second. Note was sent to all members regarding if they were members of the Civic Society that they would need to declare this as an other registrable interest, and in that consideration they should also consider whether they have any predetermined or bias of the matter that's before them. So members were made aware of that and were asked advised by the monitoring officer that should they have membership of that, then they should declare it.
Chairman, in my defence, it went out this afternoon. I haven't even seen it. But my point is, and Mr. Carmichael's just said it again, I have got no predetermination at all. I don't agree with their views, and it's been shown tonight.
Okay, now I did remind people twice in tonight's meeting, and we should have. Is anybody else a member of the Civic Society or any other archaeological in town?
I probably need to say actually that when I was cabinet member, I was responsible for the development of the local list, particularly because it was buildings valued by Colchester residents, and we had a really expert local team that helped draw up the list. And from that point of view, I can't vote for this because I just think it's a conservation area and it does damage the integrity of the building. Thank you.
Sorry, if I might just be very clear on, just to come back on Councillor Barton's point, Richard,
yeah.
You don't need to declare that as formally, but it is, I will note that in the minutes. So it's not a formal registrable or non-registrable or other registrable interest, but I will note that you were a cabinet member for that.
Councillor McLean, Jack.
Just for information, just to let you know, I do not receive any council emails whatsoever. All right. So,
really? None at all?
None at all. I don't have a council laptop, nothing. So I don't get anything. Just
no information whatsoever?
None at all. Just.
Well, okay, right. So that needs to be taken up by with the IT people, I think. And okay, so where we are.
So just to be clear, with Councillor Davison making his declaration, It's an other registerable interest which does not preclude Councillor Davidson from taking part in the debate or vote, providing that he does not feel that he is predetermined or biased, which he has indicated he is not. So that is declared formally and will be recorded in the minutes.
That's great, and thanks for doing that as well. So now we can move on. Any questions about this application? Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, I just would like a more detailed explanation rather than just relying on the summary in the minutes under 8.1, where it says the historic buildings and areas officer has identified replacement windows has resulted in less than substantial harm to the character of the conservation area. And then goes on to talk about the additional detail in terms of detailing the parapet and the door, the clock and the arches are considered to mitigate this harm. So if I understand this correctly, we are here because a planning applicant has not done what was asked in the previous application. And so UPVC windows have been put in place of what were wooden windows, sash, I take it. So just for the benefit of everyone, rather than just relying on the summary, give us the detail of why doing that, not complying with a planning permission, using totally different material, which is not traditional and of its time, is less than substantial harm without bringing in that the additional details are to be considered for the public benefit. So I want to understand that first part because that opens the way to consider the second. So I thought it was, sorry. I thought I was projecting my voice, sorry. Right. So therefore I want to understand the first part because that is the gatekeeper to then considering the public benefits. And there seems to be a conflict here because someone has gone against what they were asked, used non-traditional materials. And so explain to me how that's less than substantial harm, please.
Yep, absolutely. Just a quick overview. There was circulated on the update sheet a response in terms of the Civic Society's previous comment regarding application 171871. They are correct on that application. There was a condition that requested no changes to any of the windows. The history of the applications then moved to an application was received to that was concerning 3 flats at the property. Then another application was received in 230533, which proposed to make it 5 flats. During that time, officers observed that the windows had been replaced and invited an application. Hence, the previous application that came to committee before you was to determine whether that was acceptable. And so that's a background quickly. Your other point regarding how it's deemed to be less than substantial, the windows themselves, it's important to note that the building itself is a non-designated heritage asset. The conservation area is a designated heritage asset. It is believed that the changing of the windows to UPVC does have harm, which is less than substantial within the planning balance, as outlined within NPPF. The changes through the previous application to further mitigate that reduction in impact, it was proposed to paint those black. Members obviously voted against that, the previous committee, and this application, but it was noted during the previous committee of an objection to the curved arches on the corner plot in terms of the windows, and this application is proposing to replace those arched details. So ultimately it's a decision for the committee to decide whether these changes are sufficient. Thank you.
Chair, so in summary, if I understand this correctly, what's being said here is the officers believe that these are circumstances where you can change a traditional material for a modern material, even though it's conditioned not to do that, and that is less than substantially affects the conservation area as a whole. In other words, saying that's a precedent for everyone else that has got UPVC windows. because what's being said here is there are circumstances under which you can do that. So that's quite a significant change.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, planning doesn't work on precedents. Every application has to be considered on its merits, unlike the law, which is quite different. In terms of what you have before you this evening, it's a standalone application. The works have been carried out on an unauthorised basis. As you can see from the presentation, similar works have been carried out the length and breadth of Queen Street and St Botolph Street without consent. It is a material change. It does require planning permission, undoubtedly. And the consequence of that change is erosion of the character of the conservation area. That is harm. We have a statutory duty to protect, to preserve and enhance the character of conservation areas. The question for you in the planning balance is whether the positive public benefits associated with the package that is an offer to you this evening mitigates the harm that's been identified from the loss of the original windows. We understand, although we have no evidence, but it does seem quite probable that they were in a poor condition, being original 19th century windows. However, we can't corroborate or contradict that. They were very large sash windows and single glazed. So in terms of the occupancy of those flats, clearly some sort of noise or thermal upgrade would have been necessary. That could have been achieved with secondary glazing, admittedly, but the applicant has chosen to go down this route. The works are unauthorised in their present form, so the decision is up to you members to decide whether, in your opinion, the public benefits as described in the application in terms of the pediment on the radius corner, complete with clock and ball finial, the door case with pilasters and entablature, reinstatement together with the reinstatement of the arched heads to the windows on the radius corner are sufficient to mitigate that harm in the planning balance. That is down to you as the local planning authority to make that decision. You have the recommendation of approval before you, and it is down to you to make that judgment.
Martin, yeah, I mean, obviously I rely on your guidance as a professional to help us deal with this, and what I draw from this is that we are dealing with the application in front of us as a single application, and so we are considering whether there's more than whether there is significant harm on this one application. The bigger question in my mind, which I think creates a difficult situation, is that the chair made remarks about, in fairness to everybody else, we should pursue all those that have put their UPVC windows in, and it was undertaken that that was being looked at. But if everyone that does that comes forward and you have to deal with each application on its own and decide whether it is substantial harm or not, you could easily decide each and every case wasn't. But when you take it as a whole, you will have substantial harm to the conservation area. So I find myself in a really difficult situation here, because I understand the point that's being made. You are required to look at the application in front of you, and I will do that because that's my obligation as a member of this committee. But I hope everyone listening can see the wider issue that comes from this. If you have to deal with each one individually, where we know that people have taken out traditional materials and put in unsuitable plastic ones. So I'll leave it there. I find it overall quite a difficult position that the system is actually putting me in.
So, thank you, Chair. Yes, I completely sympathise with Councillor Warnes, and I would just like to make the point that some of those windows which have been shown to you this evening on other buildings may now be lawful by virtue of the time that the breach has occurred over. So we may not be able to take action against some of those breaches, which adds yet a further layer of complexity to the whole issue. But I do think, as a matter of fairness, if members were of the opinion that this were unacceptable, that we would have to similarly look at all of those other breaches as a matter of fairness across this part of the conservation area.
Could I ask that, the windows that you showed earlier, were any of those windows listed, or are they listed in the conservation on the other list, the real list? We've got the local list, but then they're not listed buildings as such.
They aren't, but we understand, I believe there are other locally listed buildings.
And why weren't they reported at the time? They've just been let to go. Okay, right.
At the time these windows were changed, we did not receive any complaints. The complaints arose at the time the planning application for the conversion of the flats was received, because it became apparent that the windows had been changed at that point. But until that point, to be honest, nobody noticed.
Right, okay, that's left us in a big position now where they've all been ignored for over the years, and now we've got an application, and that's been brought forward by the Civic Society, but nobody's been reported all the other ones, which have actually, you say, has ruined the whole conservation area, and that leaves us in such a deep position of where we are. If this was to go to appeal, and they use that argument that we ignored all the other buildings, the windows that were illegally put in, why are we either refusing to pass this one?
Chair, I think the inspector would look at this on its own merits and wouldn't look at the cumulative issue, because that is, he would, it would make it an impossible task.
A bit like ours, yes. Councillor McCarthy.
Inspectors aside, this member of the planning committee wants to look at the benefits of this application. Outside of this room and the Civic Society and the half dozen people watching us on YouTube, no one has ever noticed those windows, and no one has noticed they've changed. The reason it's here, or was here last time, is because someone finally noticed. No one's looking at the windows. They might look at a restored clock, however. What they are noticing down Queen Street is a decaying street, and it is a dump. Let's be frankly honest. It is, let's be frank. Let's be frank. There is two places perhaps that are beacons of hope on that street, and Silk Road is one of them. What I was going to say, we are either a pro-business city or we're not. I would like to think we're pro-business, and the benefits of this change far outweigh the negatives. Let's move on. I know we can't use other applications, but modernising for modernisation's sake, this time it really is a case of modernising for the right sake.
And is that a proposal by yourself?
Without a doubt.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hogg. Sorry, any other questions? I was just about to go to the vote. There's always one in there. Councillor Sam McCarthy.
No, wrong.
Sorry, Councillor Sam McLean.
Don't worry. I'm still not quite clear who decides what's substantial or not, and how is it measured. Because does an individual decide? Does the committee decide? Because it's such a subjective thing.
That's a question. That is a question to ask. It's like, is this picture wonderful or is it horrible? It's whatever it is you perceive it to be. But Daniel, have a go at this one.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of less than substantial, it's not categorised as an exact science. Obviously, as Simon has alluded to, every application is determined on its own merits. And there is a degree of bias between either way to which a decision is made. The mitigating factors, i.e. the colour, the painting of the window frames, the increased public benefits as a result of the clock and ball finial, and the door pilastrades, all weigh in favour of public amenity and benefits to this proposal. Therefore, it's characterised as low on the spectrum of less than substantial. Thank you.
And who decided?
It's a case of the planning officer, i.e. myself, writing this report, but now it's for yourselves to decide whether that judgment is correct.
So effectively we're now deciding whether it's substantial or not.
Yes.
Okay, because right.
Simon, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, with regard to the phrase substantial harm is more clearly defined as a concept, and that is harm that goes to the very heart of the heritage values of that asset. So normally you have to do pretty much terrible things like knocking it down or doing some pretty drastic things for it to be deemed as substantial harm, or removing features that are so key to the heritage values of it that it has very little residual heritage merit without, as a result of that alteration. So this wouldn't be substantial harm, but would be less than substantial harm. But the magnitude of that less than substantial harm is down to you and your interpretation.
So it's kicked back to us after changes have been made. We must point out the clock has been restored, much of what everybody wanted, and some of the designs have also been taken out and improved, which is what the committee wanted before. So we are now ready to move to the vote, and we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of the application we have before us tonight, please raise your hands.
5.
Those against?
2.
And those abstaining?
2.
In that case, the application is approved. And with that, we have now concluded this meeting. Thank you for turning up tonight.